My husband, he hid a knife under our pillow. I felt it long before I saw it. My name is Amara. This is my story, a strange heaviness beneath the fabric, cold as a truth I didn't want to know. He was asleep beside me, his breathing steady, peaceful even. I remember staring at him and wondering, was that the same boy who once walked me home under streetlights because I was afraid of the dark? Or had I memorized the wrong version of him and loved the wrong story? There are moments in life that split you, moments that feel like a knife is pressed against the seam of your existence, pushing, waiting. That night was my seam, the point where every memory turned into evidence I hadn't realized I was collecting. They say danger announces itself. Mine whispered. It whispered in the way his hand tightened around mine a little too long, in the way he knew where I was before I told him, in the way I learned to hold my breath before I spoke. None of it loud, none of it obvious, just enough to make me wonder if I was misremembering myself. I wish I could say I ran, that I jumped out of bed and became a hero, but I didn't. I pulled my hand away, slowly, carefully, like someone trying not to wake a storm, because survival doesn't look like courage. Sometimes it looks like waiting. Sometimes it looks like silence. I'm telling this story so I don't disappear inside it again. If you've ever questioned the shape of your own shadow, stay. I think you'll understand. Pause. Soft breath. Rain. Before the knife. Before the questions. Before the quiet fear that lived in my chest like a second heartbeat. There was us. A beginning so gentle that even now I ache for how real it felt. I met him in secondary school. I was 15. He was the boy who sat at the back of class, always late, always sleepy, always smelling faintly of chalk and rain. The first time he spoke to me, he said my handwriting looked like music he didn't know how to read. I laughed. I shouldn't have. He protected me from bullies once. A senior pushed me in the corridor, my books scattered like birds startled into flight. He picked them up before I could, looked that senior in the eyes, said nothing, but the senior never touched me again. I thought it was love. Maybe it was just possession wearing a friendly face. We had our first kiss behind the old library, where the walls smelled like dust and forgotten stories. He leaned in, shy, like he was afraid of breaking something sacred. Afterward, he whispered, "You're mine now, you know." He said it like a promise. I heard it like a poem. I didn't understand it was a claim. He used to wait for me after class every single day. Every single day. Leaned against the wall, hands in pockets, pretending he hadn't been there long. Once I finished late. He was drenched from the rain, hair plastered to his forehead, uniform soaked. He smiled like suffering was proof of devotion and said, "You think I'd leave you here alone?" Back then, I thought that was romantic. Now I wonder, who waits in the rain for someone who didn't ask them to? Who decides where your day begins and ends before you even realize you've lost your say? He hated when I joked with male classmates, said boys only wanted one thing, said girls like me didn't understand the danger, said if I cared, I'd be careful. So I stopped joking. I stopped smiling at people. I shrank myself into someone easier to keep. I mistook protectiveness for loyalty. I mistook jealousy for passion. I mistook being watched for being loved. At the time, I thought jealousy was proof of love. I didn't know it was the receipt for something I hadn't bought yet, something I would spend years paying for with pieces of myself. We talked about forever, like it was a place we would visit someday. A house with 2 children, a garden, laughter in every room. He said he couldn't imagine a life where I wasn't there, where I wasn't beside him, always. I thought it was a compliment. I didn't realize it meant I wasn't allowed to imagine a life without him either. People ask why women stay, why girls like me don't run when the first crack appears. I stayed because the cracks looked like character, because I had learned to confuse attention with affection, because nobody teaches you how to escape a cage that looks like home. Looking back, There were signs, so many signs, a symphony of red flags disguised as love notes. But love makes you deaf. Hope keeps the beat. Memory harmonizes. And before you know it, you're singing along to a song that's killing you. If this feels familiar, keep listening. This is only the beginning. This is where the storm learned my name and where I learned to whisper back. The first time he checked my phone, he smiled, said it was nothing. Just curiosity. Just being a man. He read my messages like they were instructions for how to love me better. The second time, he didn't smile. He held the phone like evidence. Asked why I used so many heart emojis with my best friend. I told him it was just how we talked. He told me that intimacy was dangerous, that not everyone deserved soft parts of me. He said he monitored my phone for my safety, for my protection, for us. He said the world was full of people waiting to take me away from him. He said I didn't see the danger because I was too kind. He said kindness could get me killed. I stopped replying to people, started deleting messages before I sent them, started rehearsing my texts like confessions. He began to name my friends like problems, pointed at their pictures and assigned them threats. She flirts too much. He looks at you too long. They don't respect us. Little by little, my circle wasn't a circle anymore. It became a perimeter, a fence, a boundary he controlled. He said loyalty has a language, that the only way to speak it fluently was transparency. He asked for my passwords, said love shouldn't need privacy. I thought love meant trust. He said trust meant surrender. I handed him the passwords. It felt like handing over a diary, or a map to every version of me I hadn't learned to protect. He started appearing places I didn't expect. Outside my after-school club, at the bus stop, in the library doorway. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then I realized it was routine. He knew where I was before I did. Sometimes he'd finish my sentences. Sometimes he'd finish my plans. He isolated me like a museum artifact, something valuable, something fragile, something no one else was allowed to touch. I told myself it was care, affection, attention, until attention became study, study became scrutiny, scrutiny became suspicion, suspicion became routine, rain against the windows, heart against my ribs, his eyes on me, always. He'd ask who I was texting, why I was laughing, who made me laugh. Every smile needed explanation. Every silence needed justification. I stopped smiling. He said I was safer when I was quiet. He said the world couldn't hurt me if I stayed still. He said I was too soft for chaos, that I needed guidance, direction, supervision. Supervision, that's the word that should have frightened me. But back then, I wore his words like armor. I didn't know they were shackles. Isolation didn't come like a locked door. It came like a lullaby. Soft, soothing, reassuring. A cage that sounded like comfort. One day I realized my phone only rang when he called. No more group chats, no more weekend plans, no more late-night gossip with the girls. Just him. Only him. My world went quiet. My world went small, small enough to fit in his hands. There were moments I tried to explain, moments I tried to say I missed people. He would tilt his head and look at me like I'd betrayed him, like longing was infidelity, like grief was disrespect. So I stopped missing people out loud. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't force me, he didn't need to. Control doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers your name until you forget the sound of your own. If someone had asked me then, I would have said I was lucky. That he loved me so much it scared him. That fear was just another way of caring. I didn't know fear shouldn't be fluent in a relationship. I didn't know a heart could be monitored like a crime scene. Now I know. Some cages are made of good intentions. Some prisons are made of promises you kept longer than he deserved. If this feels familiar to you, keep listening. The story doesn't end here. It gets colder before the sun remembers me. It happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were ordinary, predictable. I think that's why the memory feels so jagged. Fear always sharpens on ordinary days. We went to bed like usual. No argument, no tension, no warning. Just the two of us under the same blanket, pretending we were still the people we used to be. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. No sound. Just a feeling. Like the air changed shape around me. Like the room turned into a witness. I shifted. My hand slipped under the pillow. Touched metal. Cold. Unmistakable. Heavy like intention. A knife. Every muscle in my body stilled. My breath hitched. I kept my eyes closed. I didn't move again. I didn't dare. He spoke before I could. His voice too calm, too ready, like he'd been rehearsing. I thought I heard something outside. I opened my eyes. Slow. Careful. He was already awake, staring, not startled, not groggy. Awake. His eyes weren't the eyes I remembered from secondary school. Not the eyes that smiled at me during morning assembly. Not the eyes that softened when I fell asleep on bus rides home. These eyes were still, empty, a quiet calculation sitting behind them. He smiled, not with his mouth, with his watchfulness. I swallowed. My throat felt made of glass. I whispered, tentative, "Why under the pillow?" He turned toward the window like it was the most normal question in the world. Just in case. Just in case. Just in case what? Just in case who? Lightning flashed through the curtains. Rain pressed against the windows like it wanted to come in or warn me. He slipped his hand under the pillow, found the knife by memory, drew it out, held it up like an extension of his arm, and then he placed it on the bedside table, right next to me, closer to my side than his. My lungs refused to pull in air. My heartbeat pressed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. He lay back down, rolled over, closed his eyes, as if nothing had happened, as if knives belonged in beds, as if fear was a love language we both understood. I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between each breath, waiting to wake up, waiting for sense, waiting for the version of him I used to know to come back. He didn't. Silence, thick, concentrated, like something waiting to be named. A beat, another. Rain, louder. A breath that doesn't feel like mine. Then, in the smallest voice that has ever survived my mouth, that's when my heartbeat became a prison alarm. Something changed after that. Something irreversible. I started watching him, watching me. Every night I checked under the pillow before I slept. Some nights the knife was gone. Some nights it was back. No explanation, no argument. Nothing but the question that lived in my chest. Was the knife meant to protect me or prepare me? He touched me differently after that. Not violent, not tender, just purposeful. Like every gesture had a destination I couldn't see. Like I was on a map he wouldn't let me read. He started locking the bedroom door. He said it was for safety, that the neighborhood wasn't what it used to be. But the key stayed on his side of the bed, close enough for him to reach in the dark. Far enough that I couldn't. I learned not to ask questions, not because I was afraid of answers, but because I already knew they wouldn't belong to me. Survival doesn't sound like screaming. It sounds like learning the architecture of silence. It sounds like memorizing escape routes you never use. It sounds like pretending to sleep while your heartbeat keeps watch. Some people think the breaking point is loud. For me, it was that knife, that smile, those eyes. The moment I realized the danger wasn't outside. It never had been. It was sharing my pillow, sharing my home, sharing my dreams, sharpening itself beside me while I slept. If you've ever laid beside a threat wrapped in familiar skin, you already know. This was the night I stopped being a girl in love. This was the night I became someone trying to stay alive. After the night of the knife, something inside me shifted, not a scream, Not a collapse, just a quiet rearranging, like my bones learned a new way to hold fear, like my shadow learned to stay small. He started speaking to me differently, not louder, not harsher, just sharper. Like every word was the edge of something I couldn't see. I only worry because I love you. If I didn't care, I wouldn't protect you. Nobody knows you like I do. Nobody will love you like I can. The sentences felt warm, but the temperature of the room kept dropping. I started wearing sweaters in August. He made threats sound like devotion, promises sound like warnings, affection sound like ownership. If I tried to pull away, even gently, he'd take my face in his hands and whisper, "You know I can't live without you, right?" He said it like a prayer. I heard it like a map of consequences. I began practicing survival the way some people study for exams. Repeating answers in my head. Yes, I understand. No, I'm not upset. You're right. I'm lucky. Lucky. That was the word he taught me to choke on. My family noticed changes before I did. My mother said my voice sounded tired. My sister asked if I still laughed. My cousin joked that I disappeared like smoke after the wedding. I told them I was fine. I said marriage was just an adjustment, that love required sacrificing comfort. I didn't say which comfort, or how much. The truth sat behind my teeth like a storm I didn't know how to release. Because how do you explain fear that hasn't hit you? How do you report a crime that hasn't happened? How do you ask for help when you're not allowed to need it? I lied. Not because I wanted to, but because honesty had become dangerous. When my sister asked if I was happy, I smiled, the kind of smile that holds its breath. I felt like a cracked vase pretending the water wasn't leaking. I hid my fear in the spaces between sentences, in the pauses, in the swallowed confessions. I learned to talk without saying anything at all. He kept me close, so close that I forgot what alone felt like. He followed me from room to room like my shadow was disloyal. Sometimes he'd wake me up just to ask if I was dreaming about someone else. Sometimes he'd hold me too tight, not hurting, just measuring. If I cried, he'd wipe my tears and whisper, "If you ever leave me, I'll die." And then softer, "And I won't die alone." The words sat between us like a third person, silent, breathing, waiting. Sometimes survival looks like staying alive one night at a time. I became fluent in fear, not obvious fear, not running fear, just tiny, constant calculations. Should I answer that message? Should I close the door? Should I laugh? Should I breathe? It felt like walking across a floor made of eggshells, fragile, echoing, impossible to cross without breaking something. He never struck me, never screamed, never slammed a door. People always ask if there was violence, as if violence only counts when it leaves a bruise. But there are bruises you learn to keep on the inside, bruises shaped like questions, bruises shaped like apologies, bruises shaped like the person you used to be. I stayed. People won't understand that. People will ask why. Why didn't I run? Why didn't I fight? Why didn't I leave? Because leaving is a luxury. Because escape requires safety. Because survival is sometimes smaller than freedom. Because staying alive was the only victory I could afford. I stayed because I was trying to survive the night. And the next night. And the next. That's all. That's the answer. If someone out there is listening, if your story feels like mine, if your home feels like a test, if your love feels like a threat, if your heartbeat feels like an alarm, you're not dramatic, you're not weak, you're not imagining it, you're surviving. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. Sometimes the story doesn't end when the bruises fade. Sometimes the bruises learn how to hide themselves, in the tone of your voice, in the way your hand trembles when someone raises theirs too fast, in how you flinch at kindness, because kindness became a weapon once. I need to ask you something, and answer only in your heart if the words are heavy. When did love first ask you to lose yourself? When did protecting you become code for controlling you? When did loyalty become something you had to bleed for? If any part of this feels too familiar, stay. You are not weak for surviving. You are not dramatic for remembering. You are here, and sometimes survival looks like living one night at a time, breathing 1 hour at a time, choosing to stay alive, even when that's the only choice you get to make. Episode 2 begins where the bruises are invisible, where apologies sound like chains, where silence becomes the language of fear. This is not the end. It's the inventory of the wounds, the first page of the evidence, the moment the story stops apologizing for existing.